I didn't know my life was about to split cleanly in two the moment he said it. Not during a screaming fight, not after discovering an affair, not even after some dramatic confession. Just one sentence. "If you don't like how I live my life," he said casually, "you know where the door is." My name is Daniela. I'm 33 years old, and until that Friday night, I genuinely believed I was in a long-term, stable relationship with the man I loved. We had been together for 3.5 years. We shared an apartment, shared expenses, shared routines. Or at least, I thought we did. That night started like so many others. I came home from work around 5:30, my brain still full of code and deadlines from my software development job, already imagining something simple. Dinner together, maybe a movie, normal couple things people don't even think twice about. He was upstairs getting ready. I could hear drawers opening and closing, the hum of the hairdryer, the familiar sounds that told me, without seeing him, that he was preparing to go somewhere that didn't include me. By the time I finished cooking, he still hadn't come down. When he finally did, around 7:15, my stomach dropped. He was wearing that outfit, the one he always claimed he saved for special occasions. Perfectly styled hair, carefully chosen cologne, the kind of effort that doesn't happen by accident, and certainly not for a quiet night at home. I asked where he was going. "Out with people from work," he said, already halfway out the door. I asked if he wanted dinner. I'd made enough for 2. He looked at the stove the way people look at something mildly unpleasant. "I'll eat out." That was the 4th weekend in a row. When I finally said something, when I finally admitted that this wasn't about controlling his fun, but about us, he turned cold, detached, like I was a roommate asking an inconvenient question instead of his girlfriend of 3.5 years. And then he said it. That sentence. The kitchen went silent except for the sound of the faucet I'd forgotten to turn off. "If you don't like it," he repeated, "you know where the door is." He left without looking back. And standing there alone, I realized something terrifyingly clear. He wasn't bluffing, and neither was I. I wish I could say this came out of nowhere, but the truth is, when I look back, the ending had been practicing itself for months. I'm Daniela, 33, and I work as a software developer. I'm the kind of woman who likes clean systems and clear logic. I like knowing where I stand. I like patterns, because patterns tell the truth long before people do. And Van, full name Evan Walsh, was never a man who made life feel simple. He made it feel exciting. We met the way so many modern relationships start. Not with fireworks, but with timing. A mutual friend hosted a small get-together in Charlotte. Just board games, cheap wine, people laughing too loudly because everyone was pretending their adult lives weren't exhausting. Evan showed up late, confident, charming, wearing that easy grin like the world always made room for him. He sat across from me at the table, watched me quietly for a while, then said, "You're not like the rest of them." I remember rolling my eyes. That line should be illegal. He laughed, genuinely laughed, and something in my chest loosened. He wasn't intimidated by my sarcasm. He didn't try to overpower it. He met it like it was a game he wanted to play properly. For the first year, Evan was attentive. He remembered tiny things, the way I took my coffee, the fact that I hated loud restaurants because I couldn't focus on conversation. He'd text me during the day just to say he'd seen something that reminded him of me. He'd show up on Fridays with takeout and a plan, something simple but intentional. It made me feel chosen. And after a few months, when he asked me to move in, it didn't feel reckless. It felt natural, like we were building something solid. We split everything 50-50, rent, utilities, groceries. I liked it that way. I never wanted to be financially dependent on anyone, and I also didn't want resentment creeping into love. Evan agreed. He said he respected that I handled my own life. At the time, that sounded like partnership. But partnership isn't just dividing bills. It's dividing presence, dividing effort, dividing priority. And slowly, without a dramatic announcement, Evan's world started filling up with people I didn't belong to. His work friends became a permanent orbit. Happy hour invitations, weekend brunches, quick meetups that somehow lasted 6 hours. He'd come home laughing at jokes I wasn't part of, carrying stories that didn't include me, like his real life happened elsewhere, and our apartment was just where he stored his clothes. At first, I told myself it was normal. He had a demanding job. He needed to unwind. Everyone needs a social life. So I tried to be reasonable. When I suggested we do something together, he'd get this look, this expression that wasn't anger exactly, more like inconvenience. Like I was asking him to cancel something important to attend something meaningless. I tried compromises. "We can alternate weekends," I suggested once, keeping my voice light like it wasn't hurting. "One weekend for friends, one weekend for us." He said, "Sure," the way people say sure when they don't intend to follow through. I tried planning ahead. "What if we pick one date night a month and lock it in early?" I asked another time. "So you can plan around it." He nodded, distracted by his phone. Yeah, that's fine." And once, only once, I said I'd come along with his group. His pause was barely a second, but I felt it. Yeah, he said, not enthusiastic, not warm, just obligated. The few times I did end up near them, it confirmed what my instincts had already been whispering. They talked around me, not rude enough to be obvious, not cruel enough to call out, but there was this subtle way they made me feel invisible, like I was temporary furniture in the room. Like Evan had brought a jacket he'd forget on the chair later. In 3.5 years, I met exactly 2 of his coworkers properly, and only because we bumped into them by accident at Target. No intentional introductions. No, "This is Daniela, the woman I love." Just coincidence. And I ignored it. Because love makes you generous with excuses. Because I didn't want to be the kind of girlfriend who kept score. But the score was keeping itself. And by the time that Friday night arrived, the night he wore his special occasion outfit and walked past my dinner like it was gas station sushi, my body already knew what my heart hadn't wanted to admit. I was still building us. Evan had already moved on to something else. He just hadn't told me out loud. Until he did. The shift didn't announce itself loudly. It crept in quietly, through patterns that felt small enough to ignore if I didn't look at them too closely. Evan stopped asking about my day. At first, it was subtle. He'd still say, "How was work?" But his eyes would already be on his phone, thumbs moving while I answered. I'd tell him about a bug that took hours to trace, or a meeting that went sideways, and he'd nod absently, offering a distracted, "That sucks," or "Yeah, makes sense." Eventually, he stopped asking altogether. I noticed because I started editing myself, shortening my stories, removing details, stopping halfway through sentences when I realized he wasn't listening anyway. That's the thing about being dismissed consistently. You don't explode, you shrink. Weekends became the worst. Friday afternoons used to come with anticipation. Now they came with a familiar heaviness in my chest. By Thursday evening, Evan would already be talking about plans. Never with me, always around me. Work thing tomorrow, brunch with the team, someone's birthday. There was always a reason, always a justification that sounded reasonable enough on its own. But stacked together, they formed a wall I wasn't invited past. I tried not to nag. I tried not to sound needy. I tried to be the understanding girlfriend who respected independence and trusted her partner. So instead of asking, "Why don't you want to be with me?" I asked, "When are you free?" Instead of saying, "I feel like I'm losing you," I said, "Maybe next weekend." And every time I swallowed what I actually felt, something inside me hardened, just a little more. His friends became louder in our life, not physically, emotionally. Inside jokes I didn't understand. Group chats that buzzed nonstop. Names I recognized, but faces I'd never met. One night I mentioned, carefully, that it felt strange to live with someone whose world I barely existed in anymore. He sighed, long and exaggerated, like I'd asked him to solve a problem he was tired of pretending mattered. "You're overthinking," he said. "This is just how adult life works." That sentence stuck with me, because if this was adulthood, feeling like an optional add-on in your own relationship, then something was deeply wrong. The first time I seriously considered leaving wasn't after a fight. It was after a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. I'd come home exhausted, emotionally drained from a long sprint deadline. Evan was on the couch, scrolling through his phone, shoes still on, clearly about to leave again. I asked if he wanted to eat together. Already ate, he said. We grabbed something after work. We. That single word cut deeper than it should have. I stood there, still holding my bag, realizing I'd planned my evening around someone who hadn't considered me at all. I ate alone that night. Again. Family pressure didn't help. His mother would call occasionally, always polite, always pleasant, but there was a pattern to her comments. You know, Evan's job is really demanding. He needs people who don't hold him back. Men his age should enjoy their freedom while they can. She never said my name when she said those things. I didn't miss the implication. Even his sister once joked, "You're basically married to a social calendar." Everyone laughed. I smiled too. Because pointing out how much something hurts ruins the joke, and ruins you along with it. The doubts piled up quietly. Why didn't he introduce me to people who clearly mattered to him? Why did every compromise feel one-sided? Why did I feel lonelier with him than I ever had alone? I replayed conversations in my head at night, searching for the moment I'd started to matter less. I told myself it was temporary, that he was stressed, that things would settle down, that love meant patience. But deep down, there was a growing, undeniable truth forming beneath all my rationalizations. Evan wasn't choosing his friends over me. He was choosing a life where I didn't require anything from him at all. And the scariest part, I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what he wanted. The night everything finally broke didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt familiar, too familiar. I came home from work around 5:30, my shoulders tight, my head still buzzing with unfinished tasks and error logs I'd been staring at all day. As I unlocked the apartment door, I remember thinking, maybe tonight will be different. Not because anything had changed, but because hope is stubborn like that. The apartment was quiet when I stepped inside. No music, no TV, just the faint sound of movement upstairs. Drawers opening, closing, footsteps pacing back and forth. And then the unmistakable hum of the hairdryer. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, listening. That sound had become a signal. It didn't mean getting ready for me. It meant leaving. Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I set my bag down, tied my hair back, and started making dinner. Something simple: pasta, tomato sauce, comfort food. The kind you make when you're hoping to share it with someone. By 6:30, the water was boiling. The sauce was simmering. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and grounding. He still hadn't come down. At 7:15, I was finishing up, turning off the stove, plating the food, when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Evan appeared at the bottom, and my chest tightened instantly. He was wearing that outfit, the black button-down that fit him just a little too well, the tailored jacket, clean shoes, his hair styled carefully, not the casual way he wore it to work, but the way that took time, intention. His cologne hit the air a second later, the expensive one I'd bought him for his birthday last year. The one he said he saved for important events. This was not a grocery store run. This was not casual. He already had his jacket on, his phone in his hand, keys clipped to his belt, completely ready to walk out the door. "Going somewhere nice?" I asked, keeping my tone light, almost playful, even though my stomach had already dropped. He didn't look at me at first. He was checking his reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting his collar. "Just meeting some people from work." "Which people?" I asked. "You wouldn't know them." That answer had become automatic lately. Smooth, rehearsed. I gestured toward the stove. "I just made dinner. I made enough for 2. He glanced at the plate like I'd offered him something inconvenient. "I'll probably eat out." Something in me snapped. Not loudly, not explosively, but sharply. Like a thread pulled too tight. "Are you really going out again?" I asked, finally turning to face him fully. "This is the 4th weekend in a row, Evan." He stopped adjusting his jacket and looked at me then. That expression, cold, detached, annoyed. Not the face of a man talking to his girlfriend. the face of someone being questioned by an irritating roommate. "Yes," he said flatly. "It's Friday night." I took a breath, set the plate down carefully. "This isn't about you having fun," I said. "It's about us. We haven't spent a single weekend together in over a month." He shifted his weight, already half checked out of the conversation, checked his phone, adjusted his grip on his keys. "I work hard all week," he said. "I deserve to unwind however I want." The words felt rehearsed, like a script he'd been practicing in his head for a while. I put the knife down on the counter, my hands suddenly unsteady. "So do I said quietly. "And I deserve to feel like I matter." That's when he said it. "If you don't like it," he said, his voice calm, almost bored, "you know where the door is." The sound of running water filled the silence. I hadn't turned the faucet off. I stared at him, waiting, hoping for him to soften it, to laugh, to say he didn't mean it that way. He didn't. He walked straight past me, opening the door without a second glance. "I'll be back late," he called over his shoulder. "Don't wait up." The door closed. His engine started. The red glow of his taillights disappeared down the street. I stood there, frozen, for a long moment. Not because I didn't understand what he'd said, but because I understood it perfectly. He wasn't angry. He wasn't emotional. He was done considering me. And in that quiet kitchen, with my untouched dinner cooling on the counter, I realized something terrifyingly clear. He hadn't just given me an ultimatum. He'd shown me exactly how little space I occupied in his life. And for the first time in months, I stopped trying to make myself smaller to fit into it. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I stood there in the kitchen for several minutes after the door closed, listening to the silence settle back into the apartment like dust. The faucet was still running. I turned it off slowly, deliberately, as if the act itself mattered, as if control over something, anything, still belonged to me. My dinner sat untouched on the counter. 2 plates, 2 forks. One life I'd been planning for. One life that had apparently already ended. I waited for the familiar wave. Anger, panic, desperation. The urge to chase him down the driveway, to call, to text, to demand he come back and finish the conversation like an adult. None of it came. Instead, there was this strange, unsettling calm. The kind that doesn't feel good yet, but feels clear. I replayed his words in my head. "If you don't like it, you know where the door is." Not shouted, not said in the heat of a fight, delivered casually, confidently. That was what made it irreversible. Because people don't say things like that unless they've already made peace with the outcome. I walked upstairs to the bedroom. The closet door slid open, and the contrast hit me immediately. My side was neat, intentional. Folded clothes, lined up shoes, hangers evenly spaced. His side was chaos. Clothes spilling over shelves, jackets crammed together, accessories everywhere. Some items still had price tags attached. It felt symbolic in a way that made my chest tighten. I took out my phone and made the first call. "Marcus," I said when he answered, my voice steady despite the weight in my chest. "I need a huge favor." He didn't ask why. He didn't ask what happened. "How soon?" was all he said. "An hour and a half," I replied, "if you can." "I'll be there by 11:30, he said, no hesitation. Next, I called my sister Claire. "I'm leaving Evan tonight," I said the moment she picked up. There was a pause, a long one. "Are you sure?" she asked gently. I closed my eyes. He just told me exactly where I stand. I believe him. Another pause. "Drive safe," she said. "You can stay here as long as you need." That was it. No debate, no convincing, no minimizing what I'd just heard. And suddenly, the decision crystallized. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel dramatic. I felt done. I pulled my suitcases out of the hallway storage closet. 2 large ones. One smaller carry-on I'd bought for a trip Evan never made time for. I started packing. Not frantically. Not emotionally. Methodically. Clothes first. Jeans, work tops, sweaters, the blazer I wore to interviews. Each item folded with care, as if I was reclaiming myself piece by piece. Then the personal things. My laptop. External hard drive. Important documents. Old college textbooks I'd kept for sentimental reasons. The framed photo of my grandparents from my nightstand. My alarm clock, the one Evan complained about, but I needed because I sleep like the dead. From the living room, I took only my books, the ones that were mine. Always had been. I left everything else. Joint purchases, decorative things, furniture chosen to fit a life I no longer belonged to. The hardest part was the photographs. 3.5 years of memories, frozen in frames. I took only the ones where I existed alone. Everything else stayed. Not out of bitterness, out of honesty. Those photos belonged to a version of me who had tried to earn space in someone else's world. I wasn't her anymore. By the time Marcus arrived, there was a pile of belongings by the door that told the whole story. He took one look at my face, then at the bags. "Where do you want me to start?" he asked. And just like that, I knew I wasn't making a mistake. I wasn't running away. I was finally responding to the truth I'd been avoiding for months. Evan had shown me the door. And for the first time, I was strong enough to walk through it. We moved with the kind of quiet efficiency that only comes when something has already ended. Marcus didn't ask questions. He didn't offer commentary. He simply followed my lead, lifting boxes, carrying suitcases, loading his truck like this was just another task to complete. Because for him, helping me mattered more than understanding every detail. That's what real support looks like. By 12:45, almost everything that belonged to me was gone. The apartment felt hollow. Not empty, imbalanced, like a place that had been designed around one person's life while the other slowly erased herself to fit into the leftover space. I went upstairs one last time. The closet told the entire story without words. His side overflowed, shoes stacked, jackets hanging crooked, accessories everywhere. Mine was bare, just empty hangers and naked shelves, like I'd never been there at all. It hurt less than I expected, because downstairs I sat at the kitchen table for a moment. The same table where we used to eat breakfast together on Sundays, back when mornings felt unhurried, and he still looked at me when I spoke. I pulled a sheet of paper from the drawer and wrote a note. Not angry, not emotional, just clear. "You were clear about what you wanted. I took the exit you offered. My share of next month's rent is in the envelope. You'll need to handle the lease renewal alone." I signed my name. I counted out $400, my half of April's rent, and sealed it in the envelope. We'd always split everything evenly, even when I'd quietly started paying more for groceries, dinners, and shared expenses he benefited from, but never offered to cover. I left my keys on the counter. Apartment. Mailbox. Storage unit. 3.5 years of access to my life reduced to a small pile of metal. Then I did something Evan always hated. I didn't leave through the front door. I locked it from the inside and stepped onto the balcony. The metal fire escape led down to the parking lot below, a shortcut I'd used before, usually followed by a lecture about safety. That night it felt symbolic. When the front door stops being an option, you find another way out. Marcus was waiting by his truck, scrolling through his phone. "All set?" he asked. "Yes," I said. And for the first time all night, I meant it without hesitation. We drove through Charlotte in near silence. The city looked different at 2 a.m, quieter, stripped of performance, like it was resting between identities. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. By the time I pulled into Claire's driveway at 2:40 a.m., the porch light was on, exactly as promised. She opened the door before I knocked and pulled me into a hug so tight I nearly broke. I told her everything, every dismissed concern, every swallowed feeling. That final sentence. She listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she said, "You did the right thing." I slept deeply that night. And when I woke up, my phone told the rest of the story. 11 missed calls, 15 messages. Confusion first, then anger, then panic. The last message read, "We need to talk. You can't just leave like this." Claire laughed when I showed her. "He told you to leave," she said. "You left. And now he's shocked?" I didn't respond. I went to the bank. 30 minutes later, my direct deposit was redirected to a brand new account. The joint account was left with just enough to cover what had already been paid. Then I met with a real estate agent. I found a 1-bedroom in Plaza Midwood. Nothing fancy, affordable, quiet. Mine. I signed the lease without hesitation. That evening, Marcus told me Evan had called him. Different tone this time. Sad. Calm. Reasonable. Asking where I was staying. Marcus refused. Boundaries, he said, grinning when he told me. Over the next few days, the escalation intensified. Calls from unknown numbers. Messages about throwing everything away. Accusations of being dramatic. Then he showed up at my workplace. Unwashed hair, red eyes, wearing one of my old hoodies. I walked straight past him. Security handled the rest. A few days later, his brother called. Then his mother. Everyone wanted me to just talk. Everyone wanted me to smooth over what made them uncomfortable. I didn't. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to keep the peace at my own expense. Evan had spent months teaching me that I didn't matter. Now he was learning what that lesson cost. And the truth was, I wasn't escalating the situation. I was simply no longer absorbing the damage alone. The chaos eventually quieted, and that's when the weight really hit. Week 2 after I left was the hardest. Not because of Evan's messages or his family's calls, or even the awkward run-ins that kept happening like emotional landmines scattered through my days. It was hard because everything finally slowed down enough for me to feel what I'd been outrunning. The apartment was almost empty when I moved in. A mattress on the floor, a borrowed chair, a single lamp plugged into the wall. At night, the silence stretched differently here. Wide and unfamiliar. Not lonely in a dramatic way, just exposed. I'd sit on the edge of the bed after work, shoes still on, staring at the wall, my brain replaying memories I hadn't invited back. Small things, ordinary things. The way Evan used to reach for my hand in public. The way he'd bring me coffee without asking. The way I'd once believed that effort meant permanence. That was the lie that hurt the most. Not that he stopped loving me, but that I kept loving him while he was already emotionally gone. One night, I opened a box I shouldn't have. Inside were things I hadn't unpacked on purpose. Old birthday cards, a movie ticket from our first trip together, a folded note he'd once left on my laptop that said, "Proud of you." I sat on the floor and cried then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the quiet kind of crying that happens when you finally let yourself grieve something that's already dead. I questioned everything. Was I too rigid? Too independent? Too easy to take for granted? Had I asked for too much by wanting weekends together? Dinners? Presents? The worst moments came late at night, when doubt gets loud and logic gets tired. I'd think, 3.5 years isn't nothing. I'd think, maybe I should have tried harder. I'd think, maybe I walked away too fast. And then I'd remember his face. Not angry, not hurt, just indifferent. That memory anchored me. Still, the darkness pressed in. I stopped sleeping well, woke up too early, walked the neighborhood aimlessly before sunrise just to burn off the restless energy sitting in my chest. Work became my refuge. Code didn't lie. Systems behaved the way they were designed to. When something broke, you could trace it, fix it, move on. Relationships weren't like that. One evening, as I sat on the floor eating takeout straight from the container, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. I didn't listen to it right away. I already knew the tone. I played it later, standing by the sink. Evan's voice cracked halfway through. He said he missed me, said he'd been stupid, said he didn't realize what he had until it was gone. Said he could change now, said he was ready to prioritize us. I slid down the cabinet and sat on the floor again, because that was the cruelest part. Not that he was hurting, but that he was finally saying the right things. Too late. I realized something sitting there with the phone in my hand. If I went back now, nothing would actually be different. He wasn't offering change because he understood my pain. He was offering it because he'd lost control of the situation. And I knew, deep in my bones, that if I returned, I'd spend the rest of my life proving I deserved basic respect. That thought broke something open inside me. I deleted the voicemail, blocked the number, and for the first time since I left, I felt the full depth of my grief. This wasn't just a breakup. It was the death of the version of myself who believed love could survive neglect. That night, lying alone in my own bed, staring at the ceiling, I hit the emotional bottom of the story. Not rage, not revenge, just the devastating clarity that I had been emotionally alone long before I ever physically left. And that realization, heavy and painful as it was, also carried the seed of something else. The possibility that maybe being alone wasn't the worst thing after all. The turning point didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly, through exhaustion, honesty, and one moment of undeniable truth. It happened on a Thursday afternoon at the grocery store. I hadn't planned to run into Evan. I'd gone after work, tired and unfocused, pushing my cart through familiar aisles, mentally checking off a list. Coffee, eggs, vegetables, something easy for dinner. I turned into the cereal aisle and stopped short. He was standing there, staring at a shelf, like it might explain where everything went wrong. He looked smaller. Not physically, emotionally. His shoulders slumped, dark circles under his eyes, clothes that didn't quite fit the way they used to, like he'd stopped caring about details now that there was no one left to impress. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he spoke. Hey, I replied, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. How have you been? He asked. Good, I said, and I meant it. Not perfect, not healed, but grounded. He nodded. I moved out of the apartment, couldn't afford it alone. I'm staying with a friend for now. I didn't react, not because I didn't care, but because that part of his life was no longer mine to manage. He hesitated, then said, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about priorities, about respect. I waited. He swallowed. You were right. There it was. The admission I'd spent months trying to earn while we were together. I didn't treat you like a priority, he continued. I thought you'd always be there. I didn't realize how much I was taking you for granted. I studied his face. He looked sincere, regretful. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt the echo of the woman I used to be. The one who would have rushed in to fix things, to comfort him, to make the pain stop for both of us. But that woman didn't exist anymore. Why now? I asked quietly. He blinked. What do you mean? Why did it take losing me to understand something I'd been saying for months? He didn't have an answer. Silence stretched between us, heavy, but not hostile. Finally, he said, Do you think maybe we could try again? I could do better now. That was the moment everything inside me aligned. Not with anger, not with resentment, with certainty. I thought about the empty nights, the shrinking, the constant compromise that only went one way, the calm I felt the night I left. I shook my head gently. No, I said. His face fell. So that's it? That's it, I replied. You told me exactly where I stood in your life. I believed you. He tried one last time. I was angry. I didn't mean it like that. I met his eyes. You meant it. You were just finally honest. The words landed. They weren't cruel. They were true. He looked away, jaw tight, eyes wet. So 3.5 years just ends like this? I pushed my cart forward slowly. 3.5 years ended the moment you told me where the door was, I said. I just took you seriously. I passed him and headed toward checkout. He didn't follow. And as I walked out of that store, receipt in hand, something shifted permanently. I wasn't walking away from him anymore. I was walking toward myself. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I realized the power hadn't shifted because I'd won an argument or proven a point. It shifted because I no longer needed his validation to confirm my worth. That was the real turning point. Not revenge, not triumph. Just self-respect finally taking the lead. The fallout didn't come all at once. It unfolded slowly, through consequences Evan never imagined he'd have to face. When I stopped responding, people noticed. Not because I announced anything, not because I explained myself, but because I simply disappeared from the role I'd been quietly playing in his life. The reliable one, the accommodating one, the woman who absorbed discomfort so things could stay easy. Without me, his life didn't collapse dramatically. It unraveled. His friends stopped calling as often once the novelty of constant nights out wore off. Turns out, when you're no longer bringing someone who organizes, listens, and smooths over tension, social circles feel emptier than expected. Work didn't fill the gap the way he thought it would either. Long hours lost their shine when there was no one waiting at home, no one cooking dinner, no one asking how his day went. I heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances, not gossip, just fragments. He'd been missing deadlines. He'd shown up late more than once. He wasn't himself. His family felt it too. His mother called one last time, not to ask me to reconsider, but to tell me she finally understood. She said, "I thought you were holding him back. I didn't realize you were holding him together." I thanked her, and that was that. Evan lost something else too, credibility. People began noticing how one-sided things had been, how often I'd been alone at events, how I'd quietly covered expenses, how I'd always been the one compromising. Without me there to soften the narrative, the truth stood on its own. Meanwhile, my life stabilized. I furnished my apartment slowly, intentionally. A couch that fit my space, a kitchen table where I ate in peace, plants I didn't have to negotiate about. I built routines that didn't revolve around someone else's availability. Morning walks, focused work days, evenings that belonged to me. When Evan showed up at my door one last time, eyes tired, voice subdued, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. He said, "I just wanted you to know. I get it now." I nodded. I know. He waited like he expected more. There was nothing else to give. He left quietly, and that was the real fallout. Not the loss of a relationship, but the loss of access. Access to my time, my energy, my emotional labor. I didn't punish him. I didn't have to. Life did that on its own. A few months later, my life didn't look extraordinary from the outside. I still worked the same job, lived in the same city, bought groceries at the same store, paid my bills on time. Nothing flashy changed. Everything essential did. My apartment felt like home, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Every piece of furniture had been chosen by me, for me. There was no negotiating space, no shrinking myself to make room for someone who didn't see my value. I slept better. Not because I was healed completely, but because my peace wasn't being interrupted by doubt anymore. Marcus came over one weekend, and as we grilled on my small balcony, he asked how it felt being officially single again. I laughed. Honestly, I think I've been single for a long time. I just finally admitted it. That night, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, a message that simply said, "I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed back, "I know. That's why I left." I blocked the number and set my phone down. No anger, no satisfaction, just closure. Here's what I learned. What I wish someone had told me sooner. You can't love someone into respecting you. You can't negotiate your way into being a priority. And you can't fix a relationship where only one person is trying. But you can choose yourself. You can listen the first time someone tells you, through words or actions, how much space you occupy in their life. When Evan told me where the door was, he thought he was calling my bluff. He thought I'd bend, that I'd stay, that I'd make myself smaller again. Instead, I listened. I walked through that door. And on the other side, I found something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Freedom. Not the loud kind, the quiet, steady kind that lets you breathe again. And that's how my story ended. Not with revenge, not with regret, but with self-respect. Because sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is leave when she's told she doesn't matter.